Hi, guys. My name is Suman Cherry, and I'm so excited to have you join us. We are going to be talking about scaling businesses. I am the founder and CEO of Cherry Talent Group. I have the amazing Walt Phillips with me. Walt has been working with businesses for 20 years, leadership, hiring, scaling their business, how to sell their business, really everything to do with business. And what we're going to talk about today is give you some practical ideas on really how to scale and what we're seeing in the market and also what Walt has really experienced with clients. What Walt is so good at, and I work with Walt a lot, is he's amazing at going into organizations and understanding what's really going on under the hood outside of what's on paper, right? He is great at walking into the businesses and saying, okay, why is this not working? And a lot of times it's his clients feel like they're doing all the right things and still it's not working. So well, when someone walks in and says, okay, well, I am ready to scale my business, what do you think they think that means and where are they getting that wrong?
Yeah. Well, first of all, thanks for having me, Suman.
Yeah.
We've been having a lot of conversations lately with all sorts of businesses, right? From the construction industry to healthcare. And I think it really kind of goes back to what ultimately, what is the liquidity event that you are trying to achieve as a business owner? Yeah, and because that can look so many different ways. I think some people think about a liquidity event like, oh, I want to exit in 5 to 7 years, or I define a liquidity event as I would like to franchise or M&A, or just, you know what, I want a 5 time multiple on my, or to grow top line 3 times or bottom line. So I think first of all, you got to define what is the liquidity event that I'm working towards, and then it kind of helps define scaling the business to whatever that is.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, and I guess another piece would be, we talk to a lot of clients who are just tired of being in the business all the time. They're
Yeah,
like really doing everything. And so to them, scaling is, hey, I want to be able to go on vacation and
right,
not get a million phone calls, right? Like it's as
right.
simple as that.
Yeah, you and I
Um,
just spoke the other day. It was we won't say the client, but how do we I'm working on I'm too in the business. I can't work on the business because I'm in the business. And then
right.
I mean that's a whole podcast in itself on what
Yeah,
that means. But
right.
yeah, it's very much that's the case. You can't
Right.
walk
No.
away if you're too in the business.
Right. No, and I think so when we strip away it all away, how should someone I mean, and I guess you really define this, like what is the right way for your business? Because it sounds like every business is really different. It's like what is the end that you want in 5 years? What is the immediate thing that you want? And so when you're looking at that, what really keeps people stuck? What are those factors that keep people stuck in growing, really?
Yeah. Well, I mean, it could be many things. I think when you take a step back, I know, let's just, as it relates to the clients I'm working with, whether it's a CEO or a business owner or an executive, is it really, when you're looking at employee objective data, which, we've talked, I use a lot of that in helping an owner scale, is like, how do I uncover people related risks that are affecting growth or the value of the business? Or how do I identify whether the current team can support the next stage? Again, how do we define what that is? What's next stage? Um, how do we spot leadership gaps and bench strength issues or performance drag? I can't tell you how many times we've got a client with tons of top line, but because we've got so much performance drag on the back end, we're not as profitable, or we've kind of maxed our ability of scale. And then obviously, how do we protect and increase enterprise value on the people side of the business?
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
that's really where it kind of fall. What are those buckets? And so it again gets back to what are we celebrating 2 years from now, 3 years from now as a business, and what does success looks like? I always kind of reverse engineer everything back to whatever that liquidity event is, which is typically tied to scaling.
Right. And liquidity meaning that they are can sell the business at the end or they can attract investors
Yeah,
to buy into the business to help grow it or whatever that is they want to do,
could
right?
be. And usually that exit is what a business owner is working towards if they are not working towards handing it off to a family member. or are just exiting altogether. But it
And
really is like, can the team sustain performance without constant intervention from the owner?
right, right. How much is it? And I know in later episodes we're going to be talking about that, guys. Like, how are you guys causing those bottlenecks for your organization? Because
Right.
again, we could go into a lot of detail around this, but and then I think this is a really interesting piece as well. And I know as a leader, this is probably something I've fallen into is, I read the books, I watch all the podcasts, like I take all the courses, I'm watching these other companies, and yet I'm still feeling stuck. Like, where do you feel like that disconnect really comes from?
Yeah. That's a great point. So prior to being independent owner, I was the chief revenue officer, and I can't tell you how many conferences I attended, podcasts I listened to, having a coach that I would work with. I think it really would go back to, was I hardwired to be a finisher or a starter?
Hmm.
Was I to, back to what I said earlier, to in the business, to work on the business?
Hmm.
Or did which I personally would confuse activity versus achievement.
Hmm.
And so it really just depends on, you can read all the books and have the coaches and the advisors, but you ultimately have to determine, do I have the people around me that are hardwired to help me scale the business or to keep up with my vision, or can actually go execute my vision without me having to push them to do it.
Yeah, that's a really interesting piece. I know this hardwired piece is something that's kind of newer to me. I've always understood it, with hiring and things like that around the person, the core values. But I think this is a really important piece is that your scaling really has to do with the people you have and those systems, right, that support that. And if you don't have the right people, and again, we're going to talk about this more, that are hardwired to do the things you need them to do, then it doesn't work, right? It
Right.
just doesn't work. Because
I
what happens
just
when you have that, you're wanting to scale, you have this number 2 that is on paper just like really looks like they should fit, but things are just not getting pushed along where they need to. Like the details, like you're a visionary, like I'm a visionary leader, right?
Mhm.
And so all the people around me, like my number 2 is more of an operational, more structured, more detailed, fills in all the gaps. But if I had someone like me, nothing would get done, right? Like I would have all these
Yeah.
ideas and then it would just sit there. So
Yeah.
where do you see that like disconnect? How does that affect revenue, in a business?
Yeah. I mean, what's the biggest expense on a P&L? Payroll,
Right.
right? So, but I think that it's the little things that don't show up on a P&L. A disengaged employee
Yeah.
doesn't show up on a P&L, or
Yeah.
when you have to, when you make a bad hire because you think you put a finisher in the role and they're really a starter like
Right.
us,
Right.
and their gaps are in finishing and execution and details, and building systems in a micro way, and then they feel like they're in the wrong seat, and then that person leaves and you take all of their work and you give it to their another top performer, and then there's an opportunity cost that goes with that. That doesn't show up in a P&L. And
Yeah.
so I think it's all of those little pieces that add up until when you really start understanding the people that are around you, are they in the right seats that are designed to get you to whatever that goal is? You're really guessing to a certain extent, or what was
Hmm.
the Jim Collins, past performance is not necessarily an indicator of or
Right.
predictability of future performance.
Right.
And so I think all of that works hand in hand. And look, I can keep things, or you and I can have this conversation, keep things too
Yeah.
um, high level to, like, okay, how is this? How do we apply this? How do we
Yeah.
mobilize this?
Yeah.
What I do with what you're telling me?
Yeah. Yeah, and I think that is the first piece, like, what can someone do? Like, you have this idea and I think kinda stepping back and kinda recapping the episode, it sounds like for scaling, it's a very individual piece. Like, the first place is, what is the goal of this, right? Why
Uh-huh.
am I scaling? What do I want out of this in 2, 3, 4, or 5 years? That's number 1. And then also, which also goes hand in hand is, do I have the right people in the right seats? Do I have the right people? And I would even say there's another piece that I am really understanding as well is If you even if you have the right people, if you don't have the right systems to support those people, your right people end up doing things that are outside of their scope because they're having to do all the systems, and then that can lead to disengagement as well.
Absolutely, and if you bring in Gallup, if you're familiar with that research firm,
Yeah,
Gallup releases a great study every year on this the state of the workforce, and they find three things. To your point on disengagement, is um, actively disengaged, passively disengaged, and actually engaged, and
right.
almost two-thirds of the workforce, and it's every year is either passively or actively disengaged, and that is either and the reasons were why, it's not money, that was fifth. The
Right.
first one is how they're managed,
Mhm.
so the boss,
Right.
and two was fit.
Right.
I could be doing so much more, but I'm in the wrong seat, and I can tell
Mhm.
you in my previous roles, you can have an S on your chest and put them in the right seat and manage them poorly, and you're going to lose them anyway, or
Right.
you're just not going to maximize payroll because either micromanaging them when that's not the environment they want to be in, or they want to be in an environment that is fast paced and with a lot of plate spinning, or they want it more methodical and steady,
Mhm.
or they want to be starting and building things and then handing them off to someone who can finish them
Mhm.
and tie a bow around it and get it across the finish line, but they're not in that role. And so what happens? Well, I found another opportunity and the silent quitting happens. So you've
Absolutely.
got to understand, yes, I've got them in the right seat, but now how do I manage them? How do I make
Mhm.
sure in order to limit churn?
Right, for sure. And honestly, that's why we have a company, right? I have a company because most of the candidates that we work with are candidates that are passive. They're candidates that are probably disengaged. In a lot of cases, we've seen this. They work in an organization, wasn't a good match. They go to another organization where it is the right match and they excel. These,
Right.
these low
Sure.
performing, but they're not really low performing. And I think that's a really interesting piece, which we can go into all details around that. But what is something someone can take away today from this conversation? If you're a leader watching this, what is something they're like, okay, all right, great. Like, so what do I do? What's the
Yeah.
first step? And where do you feel like that first step would look like
Yeah.
for them?
So I will always go back and side with what are we working towards? What's the North Star?
Right.
And it doesn't have to be perfect. And I talk to business owners all the time, and I'll say, "What do you want to? What's the long game here?" I don't know. I've got two kids in college. I don't know if they want to be involved in the business. Right now, I'd like to grow it the best I can. And then some will answer it immediately and say, "I've got 7 more years, and then I want to exit." I've got others that say, "I'm not really sure. I've got to fix what I've got first." And
Mhm.
so I think the first thing I would do is I would strongly recommend at least pen to paper on what is the long game and somewhere between 3 to 5 years and try
Mhm.
to tie it in back to a liquidity event, whether it's top line, bottom line, M&A, exit, a handoff, because there's got to be then succession
Mhm.
planning. And then the second thing I would do is no matter where it's the services I represent or the other people in the market that can provide objective analytical data on your people to at least get a baseline of who do I have on the bus from you'll hear human analytics or psychometrics from an objective data, not experience. That can be second. That obviously needs
Mhm.
to be looked at, but hardwired.
Mhm.
And then understanding from there, do I have the right people on the bus? And many times it doesn't cost you anything to define those things
Right.
initially.
Right. You just have to do it. You
Yeah,
just
it's the
have
do
to
it.
take
And
the time to do it.
exactly. And one of the things that I had written down when I knew that we were going to be talking about this is why is it so hard for owners to remove themselves from the day to day? And a lot of times it's because they've spent their whole career initially up to this point, whatever the liquidity event is, identified their identity is tied to being the fixer. And so when
Yeah.
they let go, it feels less like delegation and more like losing relevance or control or value.
Yeah.
And then the other part is the biggest part I see is they don't trust the business to run without them.
Mhm.
And it's usually because the team or the systems or the accountability are just not strong enough. And in
Right.
many cases, that fear is not irrational.
No, it makes complete sense. So, if you're watching this, I mean, I think this is really important to understand as well as we kind of jump off is this isn't like just a you problem. Like we talk to people, Walt and I
Oh
talk to
yeah.
businesses, owners, leaders, people who you would look at and say, "Oh my gosh, they've really got it together." And, they're still struggling, right? They're still trying to figure it out. So, but the companies I feel like, and I think we both can say that we feel like that really are thriving are the ones that take the time to do this, understand what it is the purpose of it, and also to figure out who they have on the team and really, and we're going to talk about this more, how are they causing the bottleneck, right? How are they really attaching themselves too much, involving themselves too much, or even in some cases not even being involved, stepping away too much and allowing the wrong people to run their business. So, um well, Walt, thank you so much. And this was a great conversation. And
Yeah. Thanks
we've
for
got
having
several
me.
other topics. Yeah, it was so fun. Always a
Let's do
pleasure.
this again. I think we're going to try to have several of these and
Absolutely.
quick just conversations that hopefully people can then go mobilize to take action and move the needle.